The dust kicked up around Sarah Emmerson's worn boots as she stood in the center of North Platte, Nebraska. Her hands bound loosely with rope while men she had never seen before examined her like cattle at auction. The year was 1876, and the drought had been merciless for 3 consecutive seasons, turning her family's small farm into cracked earth that yielded nothing but despair and hunger. Her father stood 20 feet away, his hat clutched in trembling hands, unable to meet her eyes as the auctioneer called out numbers that would determine his daughter's fate. Sarah was 19 years old, and she had volunteered for this humiliation because her 2 younger brothers, ages 7 and 9, had started looking like walking skeletons, and her mother had taken to bed with fever brought on by starvation. The sun beat down mercilessly on the makeshift platform where Sarah stood, her calico dress faded from too many washings and patched at the elbows. She kept her chin up, refusing to cry, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Around her, rough men in dusty clothes called out bids, some leering, others looking merely curious. She tried not to think about what kind of work they had in mind for her, though the sympathetic glances from the few women present told her they understood the desperation that had driven the Emmerson family to this point. $300, called a stocky man with tobacco-stained teeth, and Sarah's stomach turned. $350, countered another, this one with cruel eyes that made her want to shrink into herself. Then a voice cut through the crowd deep and clear. $1,000, and I am taking her family too. Every head turned toward the speaker. Sarah's gaze followed, landing on a tall man who sat astride a beautiful chestnut mare. He was perhaps 25, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His clothes marked him as a man of means, his leather vest well crafted, his boots polished despite the dusty street. But it was his eyes that caught Sarah's attention, gray-blue like storm clouds, and they looked at her not with lust or cruelty, but with something she could not quite identify. The auctioneer stammered, "Her family, sir. That was not part of the arrangement." "It is now," the man said, dismounting with fluid grace. "The arrangement was that this family needed money to survive. I am offering $1,000, and I will take responsibility for feeding and housing all of them. Or would you prefer I take my money elsewhere and leave you all to continue this shameful display?" His words carried authority that made several men in the crowd shift uncomfortably. The auctioneer looked at Sarah's father, who stared at the stranger with a mixture of hope and confusion. "I do not understand, sir," her father said, his voice hoarse. "You would pay that much and feed us all. What would you want in return?" The stranger walked closer, his boots making soft sounds in the dirt. When he reached the platform, he looked up at Sarah, and she saw kindness in his face alongside something that resembled anger, though she sensed it was not directed at her. "My name is Kristopher Quinn," he said, addressing both Sarah and her father. "I own a ranch 15 miles west of here. I need help running it, honest work for honest pay. Your daughter would work as a housekeeper, your sons could help with the animals and learn a trade, and you and your wife would have a place to recover your strength. The $1,000 is yours to keep, to rebuild your farm when you are ready, or to use however you see fit." Sarah found her voice, though it came out shakier than she wanted. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Kristopher's eyes met hers, and she felt something pass between them, a connection she could not name. "Because I can," he said simply. "Because I once knew hunger myself, and because no woman should ever have to stand where you are standing right now." The auctioneer, sensing his commission slipping away, tried to protest. "Now see here, Mr. Quinn. There are proper procedures. Here is your procedure," Kristopher said, pulling a thick envelope from his vest. He counted out crisp bills onto the auctioneer's table, the paper money drawing gasps from the crowd. $1,000. Give Mr. Emmerson his share minus your fee and consider this matter closed. I am taking this family to my ranch, where they will work for their keep and rebuild their lives. Does anyone have a problem with that? His hand rested on the gun at his hip, not threatening, but reminding everyone present that he was not a man to be trifled with. The crowd began to disperse, some grumbling, others nodding approval. The auctioneer counted the money twice, then handed $700 to Sarah's father, keeping $300 for himself and the man who had organized the auction. Kristopher stepped onto the platform and untied Sarah's hands himself, his fingers gentle as he worked the knots loose. "You all right?" he asked quietly so only she could hear. Sarah rubbed her wrists, feeling the blood flow back into her fingers. "I think so. I do not understand why you did this." "You will," he said. "Come on, let us get your family and head to the ranch before dark." The journey to the Quinn ranch took 3 hours in a wagon Kristopher kept in town for supply runs. Sarah sat in the back with her mother, who was too weak to sit up for long, while her father sat up front with Kristopher, and her brothers rode in back, their eyes wide with wonder at their sudden change in fortune. Sarah watched the stranger who had bought her freedom, studying the way he handled the horses with confident ease, the way he spoke gently to her father about crops and weather and recovery. "I do not trust it," her mother whispered, her voice thin. "Men do not give something for nothing, Sarah." "Be careful." "I will, Mama," Sarah promised, but part of her wanted to believe that Kristopher Quinn might be different from the men her mother warned her about. The ranch, when they arrived, took Sarah's breath away. It sprawled across a valley with a river running through it, the water sparkling in the late afternoon sun. The main house was built of strong timber and stone, 2 stories tall with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. There were several outbuildings, a large barn, corrals with horses, and cattle grazing in the distance. It spoke of success and hard work, of a man who had built something substantial from the harsh land. Kristopher helped Sarah's mother down from the wagon with surprising gentleness. "There is a guest room on the first floor," he told Sarah's father. "Your wife can rest there until she is stronger. Your boys can share the room next to it, and Sarah, there is a room upstairs for you." "Where do you sleep?" Sarah's father asked suspiciously. "Upstairs, other end of the hall," Kristopher said. "There is a lock on every bedroom door. I give you my word that everyone in this house is safe." Over the next few days, Sarah began to understand the magnitude of what Kristopher had done for them. He hired a doctor from town to examine her mother, paying for medicine without hesitation. He gave her brothers gentle jobs around the ranch, teaching them to care for the animals and mend fences, treating them with patient kindness. He set her father to light work in the gardens behind the house, allowing the older man to regain his strength gradually. And Sarah herself he treated with unfailing courtesy. Her duties as housekeeper were not arduous. The house was well built and easy to maintain. Kristopher showed her the kitchen, which was better stocked than any she had seen, and told her to cook whatever she and her family needed. He ate meals with them, asking about their day, sharing stories about the ranch, but never pressing for information they did not volunteer. Sarah found herself watching him when she thought he would not notice. He woke before dawn every day and often did not return until after sunset, working alongside his ranch hands, never asking anything of them he would not do himself. He was fair and generous with wages, quick to laugh at a good joke, and had a gentle way with the animals that spoke of genuine care. "You are staring again," her mother said one morning, a slight smile on her face. Her health had improved dramatically with regular food and medicine. Sarah felt her cheeks heat. "I was just thinking about how handsome he is." Her mother teased, her eyes brighter than they had been in months. "Mama," Sarah protested, but she could not help smiling. "I was thinking about how kind he has been to us. That is all." "That is not all," her mother said knowingly. "I see the way you look at him and the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." Sarah's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "He watches you the way your father watched me when we were courting," her mother said gently. "Like you are something precious he is afraid to break." Sarah did not know what to say to that. Over the following weeks, she became more aware of Kristopher's presence, of the way the air seemed to change when he entered a room. She noticed how he always made sure she had eaten before he took his own meal, how he left wildflowers on the kitchen table without comment, how he asked her opinion on things around the house and actually listened to her answers. One evening, about 6 weeks after they had arrived at the ranch, Sarah was washing dishes when Kristopher came into the kitchen. He had been working on the north fence all day and looked tired but content. "Need any help?" he asked, rolling up his sleeves. "You do not have to do that," Sarah said. "You have been working all day." "So have you," he pointed out, taking a dish towel. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Sarah washing and Kristopher drying. The setting sun cast golden light through the window, painting everything in warm tones. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said finally, her hands stilling in the soapy water. "Anything. Why did you really buy me that day? And please do not tell me it was just because you could. There must be more to it than that." Kristopher set down the plate he was drying and looked at her. In his eyes she saw old pain, carefully banked but never fully extinguished. "My mother," he said quietly. "When I was 10 years old, my father died in a mining accident. We had nothing. No money, no family, nowhere to go. My mother tried everything to keep us fed, but it was not enough. One day a man offered her money if she would come work for him. She thought it was legitimate work. It was not." Sarah's breath caught. "Oh, Kristopher." "She was trapped for 2 years before she got sick and he threw her out. I found her in an alley and she died 3 days later. I was 12. His voice was steady, but Sarah could hear the emotion underneath. "I swore then that if I ever had the means, I would never let another woman suffer the way she did. When I heard about the auction in town, I rode there as fast as I could." Without thinking, Sarah reached out and took his hand. "I am so sorry." He looked down at their joined hands, and when he looked back up, his eyes were intense. "I need you to know something, Sarah. When I bought your freedom, I did it because it was the right thing to do. But these past weeks, getting to know you and your family, having you here in my home, I have come to care for you, more than I probably should." Sarah's heart was racing now. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I would like permission to court you properly if you would be willing. No pressure, no obligation because of what I did. If you say no, nothing changes. You and your family are welcome here for as long as you need. But if there is any chance you might feel the same way I do, I would like to see where this could go." Sarah looked at this man who had saved her family, who treated everyone with kindness, who worked harder than anyone she had ever known, who had shared his painful past with her. She thought about how her heart lifted when she heard his voice, how she found excuses to be in the same room with him, how safe and valued he made her feel. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." The smile that broke across Kristopher's face was like sunrise, bright and full of promise. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "You have made me very happy." From that night on, their relationship deepened. Kristopher courted Sarah with old-fashioned dedication, taking her on walks along the river, teaching her to ride horses, sitting with her on the porch in the evenings, and talking about everything and nothing. He was respectful of propriety, always making sure they were chaperoned, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Sarah's father watched this courtship with approval. "He is a good man," he told Sarah one morning as they worked in the garden together. His health had returned and he was beginning to talk about the future again. "Better than I thought existed." "He is," Sarah agreed, unable to keep the happiness from her voice. "He has asked for my permission to marry you," her father continued, and Sarah's head snapped up in surprise. "I told him the decision was yours, but that he had my blessing if you wanted to accept." "When did he ask you?" "This morning. He wanted to do things properly." Her father smiled. "I think he is planning to ask you soon. What will you say?" Sarah did not have to think about her answer. Over the past 3 months, she had fallen completely in love with Kristopher Quinn. He was everything she had never dared to hope for, kind and strong and honest, a man who proved his worth through actions rather than words. "I will say yes," she told her father, joy bubbling up inside her. Kristopher proposed 2 days later, taking Sarah up to a hilltop overlooking the ranch at sunset. The valley spread out before them, golden in the dying light, beautiful and peaceful. "I know we have not known each other long," Kristopher said, taking both her hands in his. "But I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Sarah. I love your strength and your kindness, the way you care for your family, the way you sing while you work, the way you look at the world with hope even after everything you have been through. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy if you will let me. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Sarah said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and when he kissed her for the first time, Sarah felt like she was finally home. Everything she had endured, all the fear and hunger and desperation, had led her to this moment, to this man, to this life she had never imagined possible. They were married 6 weeks later in the church in North Platte, on a bright October morning when the leaves were turning gold and red. Sarah wore a dress of cream silk that Kristopher had insisted on buying for her, with wildflowers in her hair. Her mother cried happy tears, fully recovered now and glowing with health. Her brothers served as ushers, proud in their new suits. Her father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, grateful beyond words for the man who had saved his daughter and become part of their family. The ranch hands all attended, along with half the town. People who had witnessed Sarah's near sale now watched her marry the man who had rescued her, and more than one person commented that it was like something from a fairy tale. But it was not a fairy tale, Sarah thought as she spoke her vows. It was real, built on genuine love and respect, on shared values and compatible dreams. When Kristopher slipped the gold ring onto her finger and kissed her as his wife, Sarah knew she was beginning the greatest adventure of her life. The wedding celebration lasted long into the night, with music and dancing and more food than Sarah had seen in years. Kristopher danced with her under the stars, holding her close, whispering words of love that made her blush and smile. "Happy?" he asked as they swayed to the music. "More than I can say," Sarah answered honestly. "I never thought I could be this happy." "Get used to it," he said, kissing her forehead. "I plan to make sure you feel this way every day for the rest of your life." He was true to his word. Their first year of marriage was filled with joy and hard work. Sarah's family eventually moved back to their own farm, which Kristopher helped them rebuild with materials and labor from his ranch. They remained close, visiting often, and Sarah loved that her husband genuinely cared for her family as if they were his own. Sarah herself threw herself into life on the ranch. She learned to keep books, managing the ranch accounts with a steady hand. She expanded the vegetable gardens, growing enough to feed everyone with surplus to sell in town. She learned to ride well enough to help move cattle when needed, earning the respect of the ranch hands with her willingness to work. But mostly, she loved being Kristopher's wife. Every day she discovered something new to appreciate about him. The way he always kissed her good morning, even when he had to wake before dawn. The way he asked her advice on ranch decisions and valued her input. The way he held her at night, making her feel cherished and safe. The way he still left wildflowers on the kitchen table, even though she was his wife now and he did not need to court her anymore. "I will never stop courting you," he told her when she mentioned it. "I will be trying to win your heart when we are old and gray." "You already have my heart," she said, kissing him. "You have had it since the day you untied my hands and treated me like a person instead of property." Their love deepened as the months passed, growing from the passionate excitement of newlyweds into something more profound and lasting. They learned each other's rhythms, supported each other through challenges, celebrated victories together. When a harsh winter threatened the cattle, they worked side by side to bring the animals to safety. When Sarah caught fever that reminded Kristopher too much of losing his mother, he stayed by her bedside for 3 days until it broke, praying and caring for her with desperate tenderness. "You are not allowed to leave me," he told her when she was recovered, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I just found you. I need decades more with you." "You will have them," she promised. "I am not going anywhere." In the spring of their 2nd year of marriage, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She was both excited and nervous, unsure how to tell Kristopher. She chose a quiet evening when they were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand. He turned to her with immediate attention. "What is it?" "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Kristopher just stared at her. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He pulled her into his arms, laughing with pure joy. "Really, we are going to be parents, really," she confirmed, laughing with him. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said, kissing her soundly. Then he pulled back, concern crossing his face. "Are you all right? Do you need anything? Should you be sitting out here? Is it too cold?" Sarah laughed at his sudden anxiety. "I am fine. Women have babies all the time, Kristopher. But you are not just any woman. You are my woman, and I am going to make sure you and our baby have everything you need." He was as good as his word, treating Sarah like precious glass throughout her pregnancy. He hired additional help so she would not have to work as hard. He brought the doctor from town every month to check on her. He read everything he could find about pregnancy and childbirth, asking so many questions that Sarah finally had to tell him to relax. "Our baby is going to be fine," she assured him. "And so am I. You need to trust that." "I do trust you," he said. "I just love you both so much already." Their son was born on a snowy January morning in 1878. After 12 hours of labor that terrified Kristopher and exhausted Sarah. But when the doctor placed the squalling infant in her arms and she saw Kristopher's face as he looked at their child for the first time, every moment of pain was forgotten. "He is perfect," Kristopher whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "He looks like you." "He has your nose," Sarah said, smiling through happy tears. They named him James after Kristopher's father, and from the moment of his birth, he was the center of their world. Kristopher was a devoted father, involved in every aspect of his son's care. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with James when he was fussy, sang lullabies in a surprisingly good voice. He built a cradle with his own hands, carved with horses and cattle, a work of art that showed his love in every detail. Sarah's family visited often, her mother crying over her first grandchild, her father teaching James to smile, her brothers playing gently with their nephew. The ranch house filled with laughter and love, and Sarah sometimes had to pinch herself to believe this was her life. "What are you thinking about?" Kristopher asked one night as they stood over James's cradle, watching their son sleep. "How different my life is from what I thought it would be," Sarah said. "2 years ago, I was standing on an auction block, terrified and desperate. Now I am here with you, with our son, happier than I ever imagined possible. It does not seem real sometimes." Kristopher put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "It is real. This is the life we built together, and it is only going to get better." He was right. The years that followed were filled with growth and happiness. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Kristopher's fair treatment of his workers meant he always had good help, and his reputation for honesty made him successful in business. Sarah's gardens became famous in the area, and she started selling produce and preserves in town, contributing to their income and earning respect in her own right. James grew into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, already fascinated by horses and cattle. When he was 2, Sarah became pregnant again, and this time she was less nervous, knowing what to expect. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1880, a tiny, dark-haired beauty they named Caroline after Sarah's mother. Kristopher cried when he held his daughter for the first time, overcome with emotion. "I never thought I would have this," he told Sarah. "A family, children, a home filled with love. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." "You gave me the same thing," Sarah said, watching her husband cradle their daughter with infinite gentleness. "You saved my life in every way that matters." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, filling the house with noise and laughter. James learned to ride before he was 4, just like his father. Caroline was gentler, preferring the garden to the barn, spending hours with Sarah learning about plants and cooking. They were both bright children, curious about the world, kind to animals and people alike. Sarah's parents became fixtures at the ranch, often staying for weeks at a time. Her father and Kristopher worked on projects together, the older man having found in his son-in-law the kind of relationship he had always hoped for. Her mother helped with the children and the household, grateful every day for the turn of fortune that had brought Kristopher into their lives. Her brothers, now teenagers, worked on the ranch during summers and school breaks, learning the business from Kristopher, who treated them as family. He paid them fairly and taught them skills that would serve them well in life, and they looked up to him with genuine admiration. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Kristopher surprised Sarah with a trip to Denver. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch together since their wedding, and leaving the children with Sarah's parents, they took the train to the city for a week of adventure. Denver was bustling and modern, so different from North Platte. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at restaurants, visited shops and theaters. Kristopher bought Sarah a beautiful necklace, gold with a small diamond, insisting she deserved something special. "You have already given me everything special," Sarah protested, though she loved the necklace. "I've given you a life of hard work on a ranch," Kristopher said. "You deserve jewels and fine dresses and trips to the city." Sarah took his face in her hands, looking into his eyes. "I do not want jewels and fine dresses. I want the life we have built together. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to watch our children grow. I want to work beside you on the ranch we both love. That is what I want, Kristopher. That is what makes me happy." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and when they returned to their hotel room, they reminded each other why they had fallen in love in the first place. The trip was wonderful, but they were both happy to return home to their children and the ranch. James and Caroline ran to greet them, full of stories about their week with their grandparents. The house felt warm and welcoming, and Sarah realized Kristopher had been right all those years ago. This was home. This was where she belonged. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. When James was 7 and Caroline was 5, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and Kristopher worried constantly, hovering over her with protective concern. "I am fine," Sarah kept telling him, though she was more tired than before. "You are not as young as you were," Kristopher said, then immediately looked horrified. "I did not mean that the way it sounded." Sarah laughed despite her exhaustion. "We are both getting older, husband." That is what happens. Their third child, another son they named Thomas, was born healthy and strong in the fall of 1882. He had Sarah's dark eyes and Kristopher's determined chin, and he joined their family as if he had always been there. James was a protective older brother, Caroline a gentle sister, and Thomas a happy baby who rarely cried. Life on the ranch was full but never overwhelming. Kristopher had expanded the operation over the years, buying adjacent land when it became available, increasing their herds, building their future. But he never forgot the lessons of his past. Never let work become more important than family. He made time for his children every day, teaching them, playing with them, showing them love through both words and actions. Sarah watched her children grow with a heart full of gratitude. She taught them to read and write, brought in a tutor as they got older to ensure they had a good education. She taught Caroline to cook and garden, James and Thomas to see the value in all kinds of work. But mostly, she and Kristopher taught them about love, about kindness, about treating people with respect regardless of their station in life. "You remember the day we met?" Sarah asked Kristopher one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. The children were in bed, the ranch was quiet, and they had these moments to themselves. "Every detail," Kristopher said. "You were the bravest person I had ever seen, standing there with your head up, refusing to be broken." "I was terrified," Sarah admitted. "But then you came and everything changed." "We changed each other," Kristopher said, taking her hand. Their fingers intertwined automatically, a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. "You taught me how to trust again, how to open my heart. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You taught me what love really means," Sarah said. "Not just the romantic kind, though we have plenty of that, but real love. The kind that shows up every day, that works hard, that sacrifices, that chooses the other person over and over again." "I will always choose you," Kristopher said softly. "Until my last breath I will choose you." As their children grew older, Sarah and Kristopher talked about the future. James showed a real talent for ranching, understanding animals and land management, with an instinct that made his father proud. Caroline loved learning and talked about becoming a teacher. Thomas was still young, exploring everything with boundless curiosity. "They are going to be all right," Kristopher said one night as they got ready for bed. "All three of them. We raised good people." "We did," Sarah agreed, brushing out her hair. She was 33 now, and sometimes she caught glimpses of gray in the mirror. Kristopher, at 39, had more gray at his temples, lines around his eyes from years of sun and smiling. But to Sarah, he was as handsome as the day he had ridden into town and changed her life. "What are you looking at?" he asked, catching her staring. "You," she said simply. "Thinking about how lucky I am." "I am the lucky one," he said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I got to save the most beautiful woman in Nebraska, and she was crazy enough to marry me." Sarah laughed, leaning back against him. "You did not save me, Kristopher. You gave me the chance to save myself. There is a difference." Then we saved each other, he said, kissing her neck. How does that sound? Perfect, Sarah said. It sounds perfect. The ranch continued to thrive. By 1885, the Quinn Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the area, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. Kristopher hired more workers, paying good wages and treating everyone with respect. Some of his ranch hands had been with him for years, loyal because he had earned their loyalty. Sarah's parents were getting older but remained healthy and active. Her father still helped around the ranch when he visited, though he did lighter work now. Her mother spent her time with the grandchildren, telling them stories, teaching them family recipes, passing down history and wisdom. Her brothers had both married and started their own families, and holiday gatherings at the ranch were loud, chaotic affairs full of cousins and laughter. Through everything, Sarah and Kristopher's love remained the foundation of it all. They still had their evening talks on the porch. They still laughed together, worked together, supported each other through challenges. After more than a decade of marriage, they were more in love than ever, their relationship deepened by shared history and mutual respect. "You ever think about that day?" Sarah asked one night. They were in bed holding each other in the darkness. "The auction." "Sometimes," Kristopher admitted. "Usually when I want to remind myself how precious this all is, how easily things could have been different." "If someone else had bought me," Sarah said, voicing the fear that sometimes still haunted her dreams. "Then I would have torn apart Nebraska looking for you," Kristopher said fiercely. "I would have found you somehow. We were meant to be together, Sarah. I believe that." "So do I," she whispered, kissing him. "I believe we were always supposed to find each other." When James turned 16 in 1888, Kristopher made him a full partner in the ranch operations. The boy, now a young man, had earned it through years of hard work and smart decisions. He had his father's integrity and his mother's practical wisdom, and Kristopher trusted him completely. Caroline, at 14, had decided she definitely wanted to be a teacher. Kristopher arranged for her to attend a teaching college in Lincoln when she was old enough, proud of his daughter's intelligence and ambition. Sarah taught her everything she could, preparing her for a life of independence and purpose. Thomas, at 6, was still figuring out his path, but he showed talent with horses that made even the experienced ranch hands take notice. He had a way with animals, a patience and intuition that could not be taught. Sarah watched her children growing up with mixed emotions, proud of who they were becoming but nostalgic for their baby years. "They do not need us as much anymore," she told Kristopher one evening. "They will always need us," he assured her, "just in different ways. And we still have years with Thomas before he is grown. Plus, I am looking forward to having you to myself a bit more." Sarah smiled at that. "Are you saying you want to go on more trips to Denver?" "I am saying I want to take you everywhere," Kristopher said. "Show you the world. We have spent 15 years building this ranch, raising our children. When they are older, I want to give you adventures." "My greatest adventure is right here," Sarah said, but she loved him for wanting to give her more. Life continued its steady rhythm. Seasons changed, children grew, the ranch prospered. Sarah's father passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1890, and they buried him on a hillside overlooking the valley he had come to love. It was a sad time, but Sarah took comfort in knowing he had died happy, surrounded by family, his final years filled with more blessings than he had ever expected. Her mother came to live with them permanently after that, and Sarah treasured the time they had together. Her mother told stories about Sarah's childhood, about the hard times and the good times, about the day they had made the impossible decision to send Sarah to that auction. "I have never forgiven myself," her mother said one day as they worked in the garden together, "for letting that happen to you." "Mama, you saved our family," Sarah said firmly. "I volunteered, remember, and look what came of it. I found Kristopher. I have a life I love. Everything worked out exactly as it was supposed to." "You are more generous than I deserve," her mother said, wiping tears. "I am your daughter," Sarah said, hugging her. "I learned forgiveness and strength from you. Everything good in me comes from you and Papa." Her mother passed away 2 years later, joining Sarah's father on that hillside. Sarah grieved but also celebrated, knowing both her parents had lived to see their grandchildren growing up strong and happy, had lived to know that the desperate choice they had made had led to something beautiful. James married in 1892, choosing a smart, kind young woman named Elizabeth who fit into the family perfectly. They built a house on the ranch, and James took on more responsibility, allowing Kristopher to step back a bit. Kristopher was 51 now, still strong but feeling the years of hard work in his joints and muscles. Caroline went off to teaching college as planned, returning during summers full of stories and ideas. She was engaged to a lawyer she had met in Lincoln, a good man who respected her intelligence and supported her career ambitions. They planned to marry after she graduated. Thomas, at 14, was working full-time on the ranch when he was not in school, showing the same dedication his father and brother had. He talked about breeding horses someday, developing a reputation for quality stock. Sarah, at 42, found herself entering a new phase of life. Her children were nearly grown, her daily responsibilities lighter than they had been in years. She and Kristopher had more time together and they used it well, taking short trips, working on projects together, simply enjoying each other's company. "We made it," Kristopher said one evening. They were in their favorite spot on the porch, watching another sunset paint the sky. "We built something real and lasting." "We did," Sarah agreed, her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes I still cannot believe it all started the way it did." "Best $1,000 I ever spent," Kristopher joked, and Sarah elbowed him gently. "I am worth at least $1,500, she said, making him laugh. "You are worth everything I have and more," he said seriously. "You know that, right? This ranch, this life, none of it means anything without you." "I know," Sarah said softly. "I feel the same way about you. You are my home, Kristopher. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." They had been married 17 years, together for 18, and their love had only grown stronger. They knew each other completely now, every flaw and virtue, every habit and preference. They had weathered storms together, celebrated triumphs together, supported each other through loss and change. They were partners in every sense of the word, equal and united. James and Elizabeth's first child was born in 1893, a daughter they named Sarah after her grandmother. Holding her first grandchild, Sarah cried with joy, marveling at the circle of life, at how this tiny baby represented hope and future, and the continuation of love. "You are crying again," Kristopher teased gently, putting his arm around her as she held baby Sarah. "Happy tears," Sarah said. "I am allowed happy tears." Caroline married her lawyer, Michael, in a beautiful ceremony in Lincoln that same year. She continued teaching, pioneering in her own way, proving that women could have both marriage and careers. Sarah was incredibly proud of her independent daughter. Thomas took over the horse breeding operation in 1895, at just 17, showing maturity and skill beyond his years. His reputation grew quickly, and soon people were coming from surrounding states to buy Quinn horses. As the century drew to a close, Sarah and Kristopher found themselves with the ranch running smoothly under James's management, their children all settled and successful, and time to finally focus on themselves. They took that trip to Denver again, and then others to Cheyenne, to Salt Lake City, seeing parts of the West they had only heard about, but they always returned to the ranch, to North Platte, to the valley that had been their home for more than 20 years. It was where they belonged, where their love had grown, where they had built something meaningful. "You have any regrets?" Sarah asked Kristopher one night in 1899. They were both in their 50s now, their hair more gray than dark, their faces lined with time and laughter. But when he looked at her, his eyes held the same love they always had. "Not a single one," Kristopher said. "Well, maybe one. I wish I could have met you sooner, had more years with you." "We have had good years," Sarah said, "and we have many more ahead of us." "I plan to grow old and cranky with you," Kristopher said. "Sitting on this porch, yelling at our grandchildren to stop running, complaining about my joints," Sarah laughed. "You are already complaining about your joints." "Then I am right on schedule," he said, pulling her close. The new century dawned with celebration. The year 1900 felt momentous, like the world was changing, and in many ways it was. Technology was advancing, the frontier was closing, the Wild West of their youth was becoming something more settled and civilized. But on the Quinn Ranch, some things remained constant. The land was still beautiful, the work still meaningful, the family still close. Sarah and Kristopher celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends, grateful for every year they had been given. Speech. Someone called at the party and Kristopher stood, pulling Sarah up with him. 23 years ago, Kristopher said, his voice carrying across the crowd, "I met this woman under circumstances neither of us would have chosen. But from that difficult beginning came everything I treasure. Sarah taught me that love is not just a feeling but a choice, one we make every single day. She gave me a family, a purpose, a life worth living. Every morning I wake up grateful that she said yes to my proposal, that she chose to build this life with me." He turned to Sarah, his eyes bright with emotion. "I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you, for however many years we have left." Sarah was crying again, happy tears streaming down her face. "I love you too," she said. "Thank you for saving me, for loving me, for giving me everything I never knew I needed." They kissed while everyone applauded, and Sarah felt the same flutter in her heart she had felt the first time he kissed her, all those years ago. Some things, she realized, never changed. The years that followed were gentle ones. Kristopher officially retired from active ranch management in 1902, though he still helped out and offered advice. James ran the operation beautifully, expanding carefully, maintaining the reputation for quality and integrity his father had established. Caroline had 3 children of her own and was a respected educator in Lincoln. Thomas married a rancher's daughter and merged their horse breeding operations, creating something even more successful than either family could have managed alone. Sarah and Kristopher became the patriarch and matriarch of a growing family, their home the center of holidays and celebrations. They watched their grandchildren grow, passing on stories and wisdom, making sure the next generation knew where they came from and what values mattered. "We should write it all down," Sarah said one day. She was 63 now, still healthy but aware of her mortality. "Our story. How we met, how we built all this, so the grandchildren will know." "They know," Kristopher said. He was 69, moving slower than he once did but still sharp and engaged. "They know the outline," Sarah corrected, "but they should know the details. The fear I felt that day, the hope I felt when you spoke up, the way you courted me with wildflowers, the struggles and triumphs, all of it." So they spent that winter writing their story, taking turns at the pen, helping each other remember details. It became a treasured family document, passed down through generations. a testament to how love could bloom even in the harshest circumstances. In 1905, North Platte held a celebration for longtime residents, and Sarah and Kristopher were honored for their 30 years in the community. They stood together receiving applause, and Sarah thought about the girl who had stood in this same town, bound and terrified, not knowing her future would hold so much joy. "What are you thinking?" Kristopher asked later, seeing her quiet contemplation. "How far we have come," Sarah said. "How much has changed. When I stood on that auction block, I thought my life was over. I thought I would lose everything that mattered." "Instead, you gained everything," Kristopher said. "We gained everything," Sarah corrected. "Together." Their later years were peaceful. They spent their days doing things they enjoyed, working in the garden, going on slow rides through the ranch, playing with grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Their love story became legendary in the area, the cowboy who had saved a woman from auction and married her with joy, building an empire of land and family and love. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come that day?" Sarah asked Kristopher one evening. They were in their 70s now, both moving carefully, treasuring each day. "I do not have to wonder," Kristopher said, "because I did come. I saved you, you saved me, and we saved each other. That is all that matters." "You think we would have found each other anyway?" Sarah asked. "If circumstances had been different," Kristopher considered this. "I like to think we would have, that we were meant to be together and the universe would have found a way." "I like to think that too," Sarah said, taking his weathered hand in her equally weathered one. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1916, surrounded by 3 generations of family. James was running the ranch with his own sons now. Caroline was a grandmother herself. Thomas's horses were known across the West. The Quinn name meant something, built on a foundation of love and hard work and integrity. 40 years, Kristopher said that night when they were alone. "I still remember the day I first saw you like it was yesterday." "So do I," Sarah said. "The best day of my life, though I did not know it at the time." "Every day with you has been the best day," Kristopher said. "Even the hard ones, especially the hard ones because we faced them together." As they moved into their late 70s and early 80s, Sarah and Kristopher slowed down considerably, but their minds remained sharp and their love remained strong. They spent their days in comfortable companionship, needing few words because they knew each other so completely. On a warm spring evening in 1922, they sat on their porch as the sun set over the valley they had called home for 46 years. Kristopher was 83, Sarah 77, and both were feeling their age but still grateful for each day together. "I think I am about done," Kristopher said quietly, and Sarah's heart clenched because she knew what he meant. "Not yet," she said, gripping his hand. "I am not ready." "You are the strongest person I have ever known," Kristopher said. "You will be fine." "I do not want to be fine without you," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "We are supposed to be together." "We will be," Kristopher promised. "Just maybe not in the way we are now, but I will be waiting for you whenever you are ready. And in the meantime, you have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who love you. You have a life that matters. Keep living it for both of us." Kristopher Quinn passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, Sarah holding his hand. The funeral was one of the largest the area had ever seen, testifying to how many lives he had touched, how much respect he had earned, how deeply he was loved. Sarah grieved deeply but did not break. She was 82 years old when she joined him, 5 years after his death, surrounded by family, dying peacefully in the same bed they had shared for 46 years of marriage. Her last words were his name, spoken with love. They were buried together on the hillside overlooking the valley, next to Sarah's parents, the view stretching for miles. Their headstone was simple: Kristopher and Sarah Quinn, together always. The ranch continued for generations, the story of its founders passed down as family legend. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren heard about the cowboy who saved a woman from auction, fed her family, and married her with joy. They heard about the love that grew from desperate circumstances, about choosing each other every day, about building something lasting from hard work and dedication. The wildflowers Kristopher used to leave for Sarah still grew wild around the ranch house, blooming every spring in shades of yellow and purple, a living reminder of courtship and romance and love that endured beyond death. And in the family home that had been built and added onto over the years, the story they had written together was kept safe, passed down through generations, so that everyone who came after would know where they came from, what they stood for, and what real love looked like. The love story of Kristopher Quinn and Sarah Emmerson Quinn became more than just family history. It became a testament to the truth that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best things, that love can bloom in the harshest circumstances, that choosing each other every single day is what builds a life worth living. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on the ranch in the 1950s, tending the land their ancestors had built, raising their own families on the same values of kindness, integrity, and hard work. The Quinn Ranch had survived the Depression, 2 world wars, and countless challenges, standing as proof that what Kristopher and Sarah had built was strong enough to last. On summer evenings, if you listened carefully, people said you could still hear laughter from the porch where Kristopher and Sarah used to sit. The house had been modernized over the years, electricity and plumbing added, but the bones of the original structure remained, still solid, still standing, still sheltering generations of love. The auction block where Sarah had stood in terror was long gone, torn down and forgotten. But the church where they married still stood in North Platte, and Quinn family weddings were still held there, honoring the tradition started so many years before. The wildflowers continued to bloom every spring, spreading further across the ranch each year, until hillsides were covered in color, beautiful and wild and free, just like the love that had started it all. And every spring, without fail, someone from the family would pick a bouquet and place it on Kristopher and Sarah's grave, maintaining a tradition that had outlived its originators by decades, but had never lost its meaning. The story of how Sarah Emmerson was sold because her family was starving, how Kristopher Quinn fed them all and married her with joy, how they built a love that lasted beyond their lifetimes, was more than just history. It was proof that goodness exists in the world, that one person can make a difference, that love is always worth fighting for, and that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most difficult moments. Their legacy was not just land and cattle and material success, though they had achieved all that. Their true legacy was love, shown through actions, proven through choices made every single day for 51 years of marriage. They had started with a transaction that should have been shameful and transformed it into something beautiful. They had taken desperate circumstances and built joy from them. They had loved each other with everything they had, and that love had rippled outward, touching everyone around them, creating waves that continued long after they were gone. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Nebraska plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, you could almost see them there on their porch, hands joined, watching the day end in comfortable silence. 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and had chosen each other, over and over again, until death and beyond.